So realism in film basically strives to represent reality in all of its truest forms. Realism actually represents all of the contextual elements of a film, and it tries to replicate what we as a viewer experience in our day-to-day lives. It aims to connect the film image with the social, psychological, and physical realities before the camera. So obviously, realism in film can't go without formalism, which is all of the artistic elements that make up a film. That includes the camera work, the lighting, the editing, and all of that stuff. But it aims to minimize that as much as possible. All of these formalistic aspects are not made to stand out in a film, but rather just to enhance the story that it's telling. The reason for that is because realist filmmakers believe that, to an extent, formalist aspects of a film actually distort the truth that they are trying to portray. Realism in film has been around for a really long time, and one of the most important people that you should know about is Andre Bazin. Andre Bazin believed in two main things: the ethical component and the structural basis of realism in films. In this ethical component, Bazin believed that filmmakers should strive to develop a style of filmmaking that actually reproduced a viewer's experience of their own realities. He wanted to respect the different ambiguous ways that people would interpret things in their daily lives, and he wanted that to be reflected in the films that were produced. This is why he was against a lot of filmmaking styles that involved a lot of heavy editing. He thought that heavy editing would actually directly influence the way that viewers would interpret the films, and it would remove the ambiguity of it all, which is not what he wanted. So, as for the structural basis component, Bazin had two main techniques that he would often use in films. The first one of these is the long take, where shots of longer durations were used as opposed to shorter ones to minimize the importance of editing in films. The next technique is deep focus cinematography, where great distances separated the foreground, the midground, and the background. These techniques are still often used today, but modern day films actually can be broken down into three main categories. The first one of this is ordinary fictional realism, the second one being historical realism, and the third one being documentary realism. For ordinary fictional realism, also known as pseudo-realism, everything about this is actually non-fictional except for the characters themselves. Under this category of realism, there are three main elements. The first one is a naturalistic visual style. Under this aspect, all formalistic aspects are kept to a very bare minimum. Obviously, a film can't go without editing, so that means editing is only used when very necessary, such as for shot reverse shot cuts, for eyeline matching, or matching to the master shot. And all of this helps to create a very strong narrative sequence. This leads me to my next point, being linear narrative storytelling. This is where stories portrayed in realist movies are presented in a very, very clear and logical way. The final element of this category is plausible character behavior. So that means all of the characters in the story act out in a very logical and relatable way. That means it has to be reflected in the dialogue and the actions and the thoughts of the character. Everything must make sense. The next category of realism in films nowadays is historical realism. This is where the film actually shows a very distant past, and it requires an immense amount of research. Every single detail shown in this film has to be meticulously made sure to be accurate. If not, it will just look out of place. The costume design, the mise en scène, and even the behaviors of the characters themselves must reflect the time period that is being portrayed on screen. The final category is documentary realism. This one is a little bit tricky to explain because in documentaries, clearly a lot of formalistic aspects are used. Things such as montages, time lapses, all of those things are clear signs of editing. But even though documentaries do use a lot of formalistic aspects, they do fall under the category of realism because, again, the characters and everything that we see on screen is non-fictional. All of the people that are portrayed, all of the animals that we see, the events that are shown, everything is non-fictional. Even the chronology of events that are shown are not reorganized, and that's why it falls under realism. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was informative and you found out a little bit more about realism in film. And yeah, it's 3 AM right now, so I'm going to go. Goodbye!